really excited to share this webinar and to invite all of you to consider your year-end giving strategies. So I'm Kristine Miller, and I am a partner with Horizons, and my colleague, Joel Mikell. You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, also a partner with Horizons, and really excited about being on this webinar today and talking about something that's just really important to all of our churches that we are working with and that are on the call with us today.
So 6 practical ways to finish 2022 strong. So that's where we are. I can't believe it's already October almost. And pretty soon there is going to be snow on the ground here in Michigan. So I'm not looking forward to that. But in the meantime, there's a lot of things that we can do to really get things rolling with year-end giving. And hopefully Joel and I will be able to give you some great tips to get started with that. Here's a QR code to download this year-end giving webinar supplement. It is an ebook, we call it, that really outlines many of the things that we're talking about today. It goes in a little deeper. It also has some links to some additional resources on Horizons website. So if you want to download that, feel free, and or you can go to Horizons website and find it there as well. If you're interested in getting some additional resources, Giving 365 is the place to go. You can get there from Horizons website, or you can use the QR code here, or you can just go to giving365.com and you'll be able to set up your account. Again, it's free. There's all kinds of good stuff there. There's ebooks, there's some short courses, there's webinars that'll be recorded, and all kinds of other additional things that hopefully will help you to grow ministry funding in your context. In the year-end giving guide, you'll see that there are 6 different things that we've highlighted that you can do to grow year-end giving and maybe get that end of the year boost to help you finish the year strong and begin 2023 with a bang. So the first one of these is to adopt an abundance mindset. I don't know about you, Joel, but in my work with churches, I often hear people say things like, well, people are giving all they can. We really can't ask them to give anymore. Or they'll say, well, we should really just do a soft ask this year. Have you heard that in your?
I have. And of course, now top of mind is inflation.
Exactly.
And cost of gas and the housing market and how it's changed. So all of those variables tend to contribute to, caution and cutting back and kind of holding our own.
Right. And what's interesting is research suggests that not only can people give more, but they want to give more. But I think what is often true is that people are giving all they've been asked to give, or they're giving all that they've been compelled to give. I think sometimes we ourselves kind of get sucked into that scarcity mindset and think that we need to hold back and keep our budget small. And we even invite people to make a pledge based on the fact that we're keeping expenses down and we're holding to last year's budget. And I always wonder, if you're a donor in a church, like, why would you give more if the church is just going to do what they did last year? So yeah. I would love people to remember that God is giving you all the resources you need to accomplish God's vision. And so don't get caught in that cycle of scarcity. Yes, times are challenging. Times are definitely different. We're working with that, all the things that Joel talked about, but God is working miracles in and through you. And so please don't hesitate to think big, dream big, and invite people to help you support whatever you're feeling God is calling you to do. So Joel, let's talk about some keys to success.
Absolutely. So we have 4 that are listed here. There are clearly more, but these were 4 that we felt would be very significant in what we're trying to talk about today and can help your church. The first is We believe, we've experienced, we've seen that giving works best when it's grounded in gratitude, when it's revealed through prayer and it's lived out in faith, rather than focusing on generosity connected to the budget. So budgets are important, and we're certainly not saying budgets aren't important. They're essential. Balance sheets, line items, they're incredibly important, but those are tools for management and oversight. And typically, you're not going to find spiritual growth and a movement in the heart because of a budget. So as you're thinking about an abundance mindset, always think about gratitude and grateful for what God is doing in the church. Lead your people through a season of prayer, and then keep that element of faith as a part of it. I think a second thing is always show how increased giving will enable your church to have a greater impact. One of the things that inspires people to give more is when they can see the impact of their giving, and connect that giving to ministry impact. Share your story. Every church is writing a story. And I think the question is, do your people know your story? And are you learning how to tell your story? I was with a church earlier this week, and we spent an hour just talking about how to become master storytellers and how to share stories that are inspiring and encouraging. People remember stories, they're inspired by stories. So this is going to be a great season as you move into the final quarter of this year to look back over the previous 3 quarters and look for those stories where God has moved and worked in an amazing way, and share those stories, and then connect that to the generosity of the people. And then the fourth one is provide on-ramps that create a variety of giving options. We've had checks and cash, and people still give checks and still give cash. More and more people are moving to online, but I'm working with a church that we're getting ready to add a Venmo option, so that in the context of worship, if there are those in worship that is their way of giving, they can give that way, or text giving. So rather than limit the ways that people can give, we want to provide a variety of ways that people can provide giving to the church.
I think that last one, Joel, is super important. I know a church recently told me that they had text to give. They had the ability to do text to give, but they hadn't really promoted it, hadn't talked about it, hadn't really used it. And they thought, well, nobody must want to do text to give. Well, they decided on a particular Sunday to go ahead and put their text to give number on the online version when they're live streaming. And lo and behold, all kinds of people decided to participate in the offertory that day via text to give. So making sure that you have a variety of options for giving, I think is a super important objective.
And Kristine, we've got grown teenagers. We've got 2 of our granddaughters that one is 19, one is 21, and the word for them, well, just Venmo that. I will Venmo this to you. Venmo that to me. Or they're out eating together, one pays and they Venmo each other. It is such a native language to them. We want to be sure that if those kinds of folk are in our worship services and our settings, that the language that is native to them is being provided for them to give. So the Venmo piece, I don't see it as much. I see it coming more and more onto the scene.
Yeah. One of our participants asked if we could give a real example about how Venmo works for those who might be techno novices. And I would encourage you to download the app and give it a try yourself. You won't believe how simple it is, even for those of us that technology isn't our native language. And so it's super easy. You have people, you can search for them. They can give you their Venmo contact info, and all you do is send it. If you've ever done Zelle, which is very similar to Venmo, Zelle usually happens through your bank. It's a very, very similar process. And it's super easy to do. All right, let's go ahead and move on. All right, here we go. So the next way that you can end the year strong is to connect with financial leaders today, not tomorrow, not the day after, but literally today. Your financial leaders are those people who make your ministry possible. In most churches, 50% of the giving comes from about 10% of the donors, and about 30 to 50% of your donors contribute, or your members contribute nothing. And so in many of cases, the people that are also at the top of our giving list are in their 70s and 80s and 90s and hundreds. These folks are not, unfortunately, going to be with us forever. And so we need to find ways to continue to invite them to dream with us, to vision with us, and to identify how they might leave a legacy for the church, or perhaps just continue their giving in a different kind of way. Remembering that donors, particularly financial leaders, are being asked to contribute to many charities. And so we need to find a way to invite them to dream with us and to dream about what God is doing in and through your church and what might be possible.
Mm.
Um, we're going to talk about Giving Tuesday in a second, so I don't want to spoil anything going forward. But many of your members are going to make gifts at the end of the year. This is a very common practice for donors to look at their giving at the end of the year and then make substantial contributions to the causes that they love. Why not have it be you? And so, we tell churches all the time that there are really two big questions that you need to continue to respond to. The first is, why should I be generous? And most churches do a pretty darn good job with that. We teach people about what Jesus had to say about giving and generosity. And most people who attend our churches are quite generous. But the problem is, the challenge is they're not always as generous as they might be to you and to your church. So as Joel said a minute ago, telling stories, a really crucial part of inviting people to give to you. But there are many, many other ways. I did see a question in here about growing in gratitude, and we'll circle back to that one because that's a really crucial topic. But if you do two things really well, one is express gratitude to your donors, and two is to tell your ministry story. If you do those two things really well, you will see a change in your giving culture.
Mhm.
So those are the things about connecting with financial leaders today. Joel, you
So
want to
some,
offer some of those keys to
you,
success?
you bet. So in terms of your financial leaders, we at Horizons typically think about them in two different groups. Financial leaders normally are identified by what they give, and in most church giving platforms, financial platforms, analytical platforms, your financial leaders are those who give $10,000 or more per year. But we also want to think in terms of those who have the ability and the capacity to maybe make those extremely large gifts that that are from what we call high capacity givers. So financial leaders, those who give $10,000 or more per year, typically are going to be between 7 and 15% of your families, and they're going to give between 40 and 50% of the dollars. That's a small number of people giving a significant amount of money. So Kristine, in the preparation for this webinar, I went to 4 of the churches that I'm working with to actually look at their giving this year to see if the statistics still held true. So 4 churches from a $700,000 budget all the way to a $6 million budget. So a range of churches, range of denominations. The average of those 4 were 12% of their households were giving 51% of the giving,
Wow.
which just simply says they're heavily invested. They care. You want to be sure you're investing back into them at the level with which they're investing in the church. And so your financial leaders are significant and important. High capacity givers, again, a subset of your financial leaders, are mostly identified by what they make. And so one of the metrics that we talk about is those who maybe make $350,000 or more per year. Their net worth is typically $1 million or more. That's a smaller group in the church, but they are often in our church and they process their giving differently. This group, Kristine, on average give to 8 different organizations, and some of them give to as many as 12. And so they're being approached right now. The university, the hospital, the nonprofits in your area are approaching them right now about making that end of the year gift to them. And so as the church, we want to be sure that we're also involved in that conversation. So how do you develop authentic relationships with those who make your ministry possible, your financial leaders, and then that subset of high capacity givers? I think the first thing that you want to do is there a way with your financial leaders, can you pull them together? Possibly, maybe late October, November, pull them together in a setting where you just share successes from 2022 and even cast some vision for 2023, and do that in a group setting. And then this is where, Kristine, you can get some feedback. How do you think we're doing? Is there anything we're missing? These are some of the vision and goals we have for the next year. What do you think about that? Financial leaders like to be seen as more than just givers. They want to often contribute skill sets and thinking and wisdom. And so financial leaders can be pulled together in a group setting. Your high capacity givers are most, your relationship with them is most effective if it can be in a one-on-one setting. That's what the development officer from the university is doing. That's what the development officer for the nonprofit is they're inviting them to a breakfast or a lunch, or they're getting coffee with them. And so most effective with a high capacity giver in a one-on-one setting. Always be donor-centric. And that means it's about them and not about the organization. It's not about the church. It's not about the money. It's about them as people. Make it about them. And then again, you're going to hear this again. One of our 6 is about storytelling, but that's one of those things that touches on everything that we talk about. And with this group, where possible, let them be the first to know. If there's something exciting that is going on that you're going to share with the church, let this group, again, small percentage of people giving a significant percentage of the giving, let them feel like they're on the inside and they get to hear some of these exciting stories first.
That's great, Joel. Thanks. There's a couple of really good questions also from from our guests. Laura wants to know, couldn't that pose a huge risk to your budget if you're too top heavy? And what happens if you lose one of those top donors? This is precisely the point, Laura. This is not aspirational, what we're talking about. This is just the reality. So we're not suggesting that you're trying to move to that split of that 50-10. But we're really suggesting exactly what you're suggesting, that absolutely, if you lose one or more of those people who are heavily invested in your ministry, it can be highly detrimental. So finding ways to continue to engage them in the ministries of the church, as well as possibly inviting some of those folks who might be in a place to endow their annual contribution. Many churches are talking to some of those key donors about the possibility of endowing their annual contribution, which means that annual contribution continues to live on well past the donor.
Kristine, I think something you just said is just so important to reinforce. The numbers that we're giving, those aren't aspirational, those are reality, which then underscores the importance to develop a relationship with this group. And I was with the church last week, and we were looking at their numbers, their analytics, and what our listener just asked. I asked them, I said, number one, do you know who they are? And what would you do if you lost one of them? Because in that particular church, the average giving from that group would pay a salary.
Yeah.
and of one of their staff members. And so it underscored the importance of knowing who they are, developing an authentic relationship, because remember, resources follow relationships. They don't follow organizations, they follow relationships. And so all the more important to make sure that they know who you are, what you're doing, they know your story, and there's a relationship in place.
I think that's great. And if you haven't done the math for yourselves, I encourage you to do that. Find out if what does it look like in your particular context? Are you getting 50% of your contributions from 10% of your donors, or are you a little different in that way? So another question that came up is what are some of the tangible ways to to invest back in your donors? And they mentioned excuse me, year-end giving statements. And thinking that's not quite enough. 100% agree with that. Some things you might think about. We typically encourage churches not to send just year-end giving statements, but do quarterly statements, which gives you an opportunity again to do, as Joel was just talking about, is connect ministry with money. Right here, you have a statement of what you've given to the church. Make sure that you're telling an impact story in that same statement, so people make that connection that their investment in the ministry is actually having the impact that they wanted to see. So making sure that you give those impact stories. The question might also have something to do with about maybe a gift or something. And I know in a lot of nonprofit settings, the nonprofit will send some sort of a trinket or gift or something to donors. I've looked at a lot of research that suggests that donors really don't want that. It's really not helpful. In fact, in some cases, it can actually be detrimental. So most donors today, a thank you note that is well written, that is personal, that talks about impact, it is far, far more effective than sending a coffee mug or some sort of other little trinket. So encourage you to really focus on the thank you and on the impact storytelling. All right, let's move on, and we'll grab some of these other questions as we get further along. Hopefully we'll have time. Telling impact stories. Again, we've been talking a lot about impact stories, but this is just so huge. One of the people that I follow in their research is Professor Russell James, and he researches giving, particularly in the area of planned giving. And I also follow the people that run something called the Storytelling Conference. So there's actually a full conference on storytelling, but both of them seem to agree about the point that one of the things that really compels donors is if you tell the story and allow the donor to actually finish the story. So you set up a proposition, and then the donor begins to see him or herself in that setting, and the donor becomes the hero of the story by completing that story. So give them an opportunity to be a part of something big, of a story that is not yet finished. And I think your donors will respond well to that. Year-end giving is a perfect time to tell the story of what you've been up to. What have you done this year? What are you planning to do next year? What is your vision for the future? What are you going to do more of, so that people can get excited about it? This also helps you establish credibility and trust. Donors, again, want to see an impact. And so by telling them your story, you've affirmed for them that what you said you were going to do, you actually accomplished. Here's just one quick example about telling a story and asking a donor to finish it. So you might say something like this. For the past 9 years, it has been our privilege to fill backpacks with weekend meals for 79 children at the elementary school. It costs $144 to feed each child during the year. Beginning this September, we're expanding this ministry to another elementary school where 64 identified children are at risk of going hungry if we don't act. Please ask God how you are able to respond to God's goodness in your life and the needs of these at-risk children. So you've told the story, you've given them some context, some numerical facts that enables them to understand the impact that they can have, and you've told them they can make this story a good one. It can end well with their support and with their help. Joel, you want to talk about some keys to success?
You bet. You bet. So, in addition to talking about the number of backpacks, the number of schools, one of the keys to success is tell the story of one changed life by a backpack. If you're talking about how many children may have attended children's camp in your church, or how many teenagers were a part of the Disciple Now weekend, those data points are important to show quantity and to kind of give some metrics around the number. But boy, what really begins to move the heart is the story of one changed life. So Kristine, last year I participated in a charity concert where the concert was raising money to support an organization that was helping rescue young people from human trafficking. And so in the intermission, the executive director had a number of slides with data, metrics, where North Carolina stood in relation to the rest of the states in the United States, and then particularly in North Carolina, where we live, what were the hot spots in cities? And a lot of important and significant information, but I wasn't inspired. Where I became inspired to give is when the executive director introduced us to a young lady who was with us that afternoon and shared her story. And then when she said, there are hundreds like me who want to be rescued, I'm able to put a face, a person, a situation in connection to this organization that was rescuing dozens and dozens. It was the story of one changed life that moved us from the number of people to my heart really is inspired to give. Tell the story of one changed life. Always connect giving with ministry. And by that, when you tell a story, be sure that you're saying to your people, thank you for your generosity. Thank you for your giving. Your giving made that story possible. It is your giving that wrote you into that story. You're a part of that story. So when you tell a good story, you share a story of ministry impact, thank your people and connect their giving to that specific story. And again, remember, facts and figures are not the story. They inform, they quantify, but it's stories that people remember, and it's stories that move the heart and touch the emotion. Kristine, you and I have used the phrase that great stories connect the eyes of the head to the eyes of the heart. And at the end of the day, generosity really begins in the heart. That's where the heart, and there's a scripture that you and I use quite a bit, that where your treasure is, there your heart is as well. Jesus connected heart and treasure. And so stories, not facts and figures, it's stories that touch the heart. Use weekly offering talks. So you may say, well, we don't even take the offering anymore. It doesn't matter. People still give. Find a moment in your worship service to share. And you might even say, we don't take an offering anymore because of this or that. But thank you for your giving. And you may give at our website, or you may give online. You may do recurring giving. We want to thank you for the various ways you give. And I want to tell you a story this morning, how your giving has made a difference. So even if you're not taking the offering physically, you still want to do weekly talks. If you say, well, we can't do it weekly, well, then do it bi-weekly, bi-monthly. But please, please, please find ways in your worship setting to help people see that their giving is making a difference. And then, as we've already shared, always use donor-centric language. If you're writing a letter, a thank you note, if it's a quarterly giving statement, use donor-centric language. And Kristine and I can help you with that. We've got examples that show the difference between an organizational-centric communication and a donor-giver-centric communication.
Yeah, there's some great resources on Giving 365 about donor-centric language. I did a video on that, and there's also some other materials. So if you're not understanding or not clear about donor-centric language, you can certainly find some more help there. Joel, one of our guests talked about impact stories. They're trying to implement giving impact stories, but haven't been able to get staff to really help support the bubbling up of those stories. What do you suggest for him to kind of help to get those staff members a little bit more engaged in telling stories?
And I tell you, I can't tell you how many times we hear that very thing. You've got people that understand the power of story, and they want to see more of that in the worship setting. But then you've got staff who have 1 hour. They've got all these various elements that they've got to figure out how to work in the liturgy, the music, the homily, the message, all these things, and they're on a very tight time frame. So I think number one, don't give up. Don't give up. And then look for ways to help them see how it can be done in a way that is not going to take a lot of time. A good giving story is, 45 seconds to a minute. And then help them see, if you can, how these stories will impact giving, that ultimately will impact their ministries, which will ultimately then impact the church at large. So you have to sometimes connect the dots for them. But don't give up. Don't give up. Just continue to kind of try to push that ball down the field. But I will say, and Kristine, I think you found this to be true too, that it doesn't work without the staff support. And one of the churches where it's worked the best is where they have made a part of their weekly staff meeting, a part of their weekly staff meeting. Each staff member is invited to bring a story. Bring a story from this past week from your ministry and share it. And then they've got 4 or 5 stories that they can pick from. And so the staff are bubbling up the stories, sharing the stories, and then they've got this vault of stories that they can pull from. So don't grow weary in well-doing. In due time, you'll reap a harvest. Just don't give up.
Thanks, Joel. All right. Our next strategy for year-end giving is participating in Giving Tuesday. I'd love to know if any of you on this call, if you can send something quickly in the Q&A, if you've done Giving Tuesday before or not. Giving Tuesday this year is November 29th, so it is specifically on that day. Giving Tuesday has been around about 10 years, but 35 million participated in 2021, and I'll bet some of those people go to your church. Year-end giving is certainly focused on Giving Tuesday. $2.7 billion was given in 2021. So that's a lot of resources that are coming to worthy causes towards the end of the year. So if you're going to participate in Giving Tuesday, you can go to the Giving Tuesday website. It is free. You can begin using hashtag Giving Tuesday. You can put it on your social media. You can make sure that you announce it in Sunday services, etc. One way to get started might be to choose a project. And if this is your first time doing Giving Tuesday, you might start with a relatively small project, maybe like the backpack project that I kind of gave that example a minute ago, or something that is relatively small and doable, just to test the waters and get your folks used to the fact that you are a Giving Tuesday participant. It is one of the easiest low-hanging fruit kind of options that you have for the end of the year. It requires very, very little on your part to participate, and you've got nothing to lose by inviting people to make a gift to your church when they're making their Giving Tuesday contributions.
Some keys to success, and Kristine has touched on a couple of these. Establish a goal and where the funds will be used, and don't be afraid to promote your church as as a recipient. You may want to say you can, on Giving Tuesday, you can give to our church, and here's the project that we'd like to fund through Giving Tuesday. And then here are a couple of other nonprofits that our church has a partnership with, or we'd like to participate. So set a goal, and then where the funds can be used. Connect Giving Tuesday on your website so that when people go to your website, on your giving page, there is a place where they can click on Giving Tuesday, and they don't have to go to a lot of effort or extra keystrokes to be able to participate. As Kristine said, hashtag Giving Tuesday, begin promoting now. I Googled earlier, Kristine, just Giving Tuesday, and there's so many resources, step by step, how to set it up, how to put it on your website, how to promote it, and all of that. So begin now, learning how to do that and getting your publicity in place. You definitely want to review your online giving process and make sure that what you're going to do with Giving Tuesday connects to your current online giving platform. And then, as we've already said, again, so much of this, there's so much overlap and so much splash over. Say thank you. If you promote Giving Tuesday in your church, then come back and give an update, and then say thank you, and let people know how many participated, how much you were able to raise, and then what kind of projects you're going to be able to execute on. This is somewhat new in churches. It's something, though, that we believe can be a great way to teach giving. And give people an opportunity. And you might even say to your church, if you're not currently giving anywhere, try this as a first way to give and see if it doesn't make you feel good inside to participate with something on a Giving Tuesday. I think it can be a powerful new tool for churches to use.
Yeah, one of the things we know is that in most churches, pledged income is on the decline.
Mhm.
And so no longer can we rely on pledged income to fully fund our ministries. And so something like Giving Tuesday is a wonderful way, as Joel just said, to even get a first-time donor, to get them started, to get them on that journey. And once they become invested in the ministries of the church, even if it is a relatively small level, chances are they'll become more involved and engaged. And as the scripture Joel mentioned earlier about where your treasure is, your heart will be also. If people give you just $50 on Giving Tuesday, their heart will follow that contribution, and they're more likely to be attentive to what's happening in the ministries of your church. We have one of our guests who mentioned that they did Giving Tuesday for the first time last year, and they're looking forward to doing even better this coming year. And another guest asked about using that Giving Tuesday resource to do general ministry funding. And absolutely. So first thing I'd say about that is if you can, avoid using the word deficit when you talk about your budget. And when you're looking at the end of the year, most churches see a considerable amount of their giving happening in December. And so some churches begin getting very nervous and anxious and begin to say, we're running a deficit. And then Christmas happens, and then all of a sudden in January, they're fine. And in the meantime, they've raised a lot of anxiety, really fed into that scarcity mindset. And yet it was all for nothing. And so try to use really positive language. Talk about what you are doing, not what you can't do. Talk about what you will do when resources become available, not about how your ministry is being choked by the fact that you are running a deficit. And when you talk about Giving Tuesday, instead of calling it your annual budget or general fund, call it what it really is, and that's ministry funding. Ministry funding is really what you're asking people to provide. And so using Giving Tuesday to enhance your giving to your ministry funding budget is an excellent idea and strategy, and I would encourage you to give it a try. Hopefully you'll end up with a surplus to begin the beginning of 2023.
And Kristine, so important what you just said about don't use the word deficit, use the word opportunity and ministry impact. And if you are in a deficit at this time, And this might be a way to close some of that gap. That's okay to understand and to feel, but that's not how you want to promote Giving Tuesday. Promote Giving Tuesday as an opportunity to invest in ministry.
And again, just a side note, we're not suggesting to not be transparent here. We're just talking about choosing words that are more compelling and more inviting.
Exactly.
All right, we're getting ready to close in on the final couple of ideas here, Joel. Reinvigorate your planned giving efforts. The end of the year is a time when people spend a lot of time with their families. Often they have some downtime, and it's a time of personal and family reflection. And so a lot of people involve themselves in planned giving towards the end of the year or the beginning of the following year. And so if you don't have a planned giving initiative in your church, now might be a good time to get started. Most churches that we work with have a planned giving effort, but it's kind of on the side burner or, not necessarily in the forefront. So now's the time to bring it out and to remind people of their opportunities to make substantial contributions to your endowment funds. Again, we talked about this earlier, asking seniors to endow their annual pledge. Many are willing and able to do that, just haven't really ever thought about it. We've heard for many years about the wealth tsunami that was happening between builders and baby boomers. Well, guess what? There's another wealth tsunami happening right now, and it's actually already begun from baby boomers to their millennials, typically children. And so $60 trillion will be passing down in wealth. Now, a lot of people will hesitate to make a planned gift because they want to make sure that their children are taken care of. And that is absolutely wonderful. But people can take care of their children and also give to their churches. So there are ways that it can be structured. Maybe the church gets 10% of the estate, or just a fraction of it, a small part. Some people take a look and they say, okay, I've got 5 children and I've got my church, so we'll just divide the estate in 6. So they treat the church as one of those children. However the donor wants to structure it, when they begin to have that conversation, that's when you find some really, really rich conversations happening about what is meaningful to them in the church, what's meaningful to them in leaving a legacy. People have philanthropic objectives. They want to accomplish something in particular causes. So when you have those, as we talked earlier about those authentic conversations with some of those people who have considerable assets, find out what makes them happy, what brings them joy, what kinds of charitable contributions would enable them to feel really good about what they've set up in their estate planning. One other quick note about estate planning. Most of the time we think about a will or estate plan as the primary plan giving tool, but don't forget about beneficiary designations. Those are pretty simple to do. In some cases, they can actually be done online. If your donors have a donor advised fund, if they have an IRA, if they have an investment account, all of those require a beneficiary designation. So it might as well be you, especially for those who may not have children or may have assets in another place that they're intending to pass along to their children. For a donor advised fund, just a quick side note, if you have people giving to you from donor advised funds, everything that goes into a donor advised fund has to eventually end up with a charity. And so if the donor passes and they have not set up that donor advised fund to go to their children, those funds do have to have a beneficiary designation that has to be a charity. So you can ask your donor advised fund donors if maybe you could be the recipient of that. And it's a wonderful way to give them an opportunity to leave a legacy to your church and also make great use of that donor advised fund. Joel, some keys to success.
You bet. So let me actually start with the second bullet here. Don't stress about not being a financial expert. If you're thinking, what is a donor advised fund? What is a split interest gift? What is the testamentary gift? Some of those phrases that are part of planned giving, don't feel like you've got to become an expert. Don't get stressed out there. And then I'm going to go to the fourth bullet. Now, if you're a part of a denomination, every denomination has a foundation and can give you some help. And then there are some foundations that specialize in helping churches, and they can help you if you don't have an endowment set up, or if you don't have planned giving set up. They can help you with that, and possibly even in your own church, you'll have an attorney or someone who knows how to help you do this. If you have planned giving in place, review your existing documents and policies and just make sure they're current as the tax laws change and as the culture changes. Make sure you're staying relevant and current with that. And then again, we've talked about stories and all these other areas. One of the best ways to get planned giving on the radar of people in your church is a testimony from someone living who has done that, and let them share why they're leaving a gift with the church, what that means to them, and even how they plan to explain that to their children, or how they came about making that gift. Again, story and testimony so powerful here as well.
Just a quick follow-up on that, Joel. It's that Russell James, who I referenced earlier, a researcher, did a lot of research about what compels people to make a bequest gift. And, so often in the church, we wait until someone dies, and then we celebrate the gift that person has left. And we talk about how, Betty was such a wonderful member here for 50 years, and she left this lovely bequest. And isn't that great? That Betty did that. And that's all a story we absolutely want to celebrate and share. But what Russell James discovered is that people weren't really compelled to make a testamentary gift at that point, because they didn't really want to be like Betty, because Betty's dead.
Yeah.
And so the testimony from a donor who's actually alive is a lot more compelling. So find people that have made testamentary gifts to the church, left you in their estate, made you a beneficiary, allow them to tell their story, and it'll have a lot more impact than telling the story of a donor who is no longer with us. So quick.
That's great. That's a great story.
Sorry, I hit my mute button. So we just have a few questions that we want to make sure we answer too. So we'll go through this last one pretty quickly so we can get to your questions. Make sure that you're measuring your results. You'll want to compare year over year contributions per household. Now, this is both in pledging households as well as non-pledging households. Some of the people that are in your church that are contributing who have not made a pledge, especially if they're recurring donors, somebody that set that up through their bank or through your website, they don't realize that they haven't made a pledge. They think they're pledgers. So we can't necessarily differentiate as clearly as we used to be able to, but make sure that you're looking year over year to see if the strategies that you've implemented are having an impact. You want to track some metrics. Analytics is one of those things that we offer to churches. Some churches aren't necessarily ready for a dashboard that's going to talk about lapsed donors and first-time donors and that kind of thing. At the very, very minimum, we encourage you to take a look at mean, median, and mode, the 3 M's. Take a look at those year over year. And if you see those going up, then chances are the strategies that you've employed are actually making a difference. Make sure you're taking a look at the ages of your donors through those giving ranges and identify where you might be vulnerable. If you've got 5 donors giving 50% of giving and they're all in their 90s, you definitely have some challenges ahead, and you want to make sure you know that prior to something actually happening. So all of these things are these ways to measure your results. If you're doing Giving Tuesday, measure your Giving Tuesday, put a Giving Tuesday button on your drop-down menu so that you can actually track Giving Tuesday gifts. Somebody asked a question about a PayPal button on Giving Tuesday social media or other communications. I think putting a PayPal button is great. A lot of churches are beginning to use kind of those third-party providers. And also, do not underestimate the power of the QR code. For a while, QR codes were out, but QR codes are definitely back in. They're super easy to use. So using a QR code like we did earlier on our screen, people can grab that off your screen, whether they're watching worship, or whether they're looking at your bulletin, or whether they're on your website, and you can get them directly to the place where you can actually track those Giving Tuesday contributions.
Quick keys, and we'll do this very quickly. Use your church management software to track the salient data. Most of the top key church management software platforms have a financial component that you can go in and pull out these kinds of data points. Again, as Kristine said, for Giving Tuesday or other special asks, be sure you set up some kind of tracking in advance to assess, is it working? And then you can do year-over-year comparisons around effectiveness related to your efforts. And then again, this is a real passion of ours at Horizons. And we've got several platforms that we can help you set up and learn how to use analytics to measure real-time data, and then how to use that data to inform strategy.
That's great. So that was a fire hose, that last one. Sorry about that. Some great questions and comments from people. We'll try to get to several of these here. Someone earlier asked about creative examples of how to grow the congregation in gratitude. This is a brilliant question. We could probably do a whole webinar on this, but I want to just give it a few minutes here. We talk about giving and generosity as being grounded in gratitude, revealed through prayer, and lived in faith. So grounded in gratitude. So the journey begins with the understanding of gratitude and being grateful for the gifts that God has provided. And so gratitude is key. I think one of the most important ways that you can do that is begin to express gratitude to your donors, whether they're giving financially or whether they're investing their time in ministry, whether it's serving on the church leadership board or a Sunday school teacher or any of those capacities, and beginning to express gratitude in that way. You might also, a couple of churches I've worked with have done gratitude appeals. And so the focus is inviting people to consider how grateful they are to various ministries in the church, people in the church that have maybe helped to shape them, and to offer a contribution to the church in honor of and in gratitude for those folks. So those are just a couple of ways. Joel, you have anything you want to add to that?
I wanted to add to one of the questions that was on here, anonymous attendee. It says, we were about to meet with our high capacity givers as we begin our stewardship campaign. Is it a good idea to ask these people for their commitment during this meeting, or just let it be an appreciation and casting vision for 2023? I would err on just making it relational and personal. I would err on not making it an ask, but just share your gratitude and appreciation for their investment and their involvement in the ministry. My instinct tells me they will bring up the financial piece. You don't need to bring that up as well. Let it be a time where you just say, thank you for what you've meant, what you're doing, and your investment in the church.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think one of the other questions that's kind of related to that, Joel, is about some of the leaders are concerned about offending members who aren't included in special gatherings. It's a very good question. And I think sometimes we err on the side of not offending those who contribute nothing. And in the meantime, we offend those who are making our ministry possible. So, people have demonstrated their investment and their willingness to provide ministry support. They've expressed their gratitude to God by being donors who are at the top of your giving list and investing heavily. I would much rather err on the side of offending those people who are not contributing anything, who haven't really gotten on board with that yet, and make sure that I'm investing my time and energy into those people who are doing the same with the ministries of the church. Joel, anything to add to that?
One of the approaches and targeting that group and creating a message unique to them is to just look at it as a leadership summit or a leadership gathering where you not only gather your financial leaders, but you also gather your ministry leaders, those who are heavily invested with time and talent. And so you're pulling your time, talent, treasure, investors together. And so your message really is around leadership, thanking them for their leadership, and then bring into that gathering, some of the financial data points that's important to that group. But rather than segregating just the people that are financial leaders and only pulling together financial leaders, think about leadership more broadly. And so that's just one of the ways to keep it from looking like we're playing favorites. And that's, I think every single church wrestles with that. And that's a tension, again, that I think is healthy. But to your point earlier, Kristine, we run the risk of, we don't want to offend the person who's not giving at the risk of offending the person who's really all in giving. So learning how to balance that tension is always going to be there.
Yeah, well said. Well said. One of our other guests wants to know if a story told anonymously is still effective, because some people may be okay with having their story told, but don't want to draw attention to themselves. I think that's a really good question. And some of our stories are sensitive, where revealing that story would reveal some personal information that may not that the person whose story is being told may not want out there. So I think I would much rather tell an anonymous story than not tell the story at all. I do think they're still effective, even if they're anonymous. I think the challenge is to tell the story of just that one person. So often we, like Joel was saying earlier, we go to numbers and data and we say, well, we had 100 kids at VBS last week, and isn't that fabulous? And we had, only 75 last year. Yeah, that's great. But tell me the story of one kid whose heart was changed because he attended VBS. And that's the story I want to know. And whether I know the name of that child or not, I don't think is super important. But just to know that my church is having that kind of an impact on that one sweet little soul would make all the difference to me.
Can I grab one more question that I think is really, really important to this? And this is from one of our guests. And the question is, we have several church leaders, elders/deacons who do not give, or they give very little. Is this something worth addressing? Well, we'd love to do a whole webinar if we could around the importance of leaders modeling and being a part of just showing what generosity looks like. And again, at Horizons, and I know I've said this a lot today, but one of the convictions that we have is if you're on your finance team, if you're on SPRC, your personnel team, whatever team it is, and you're making decisions around the finances, you must be an investor in that. And we encourage churches to have leadership giving covenants so that particularly if you're going to ever be on a team that is voting on financial things, those who vote should be those who are giving. And again, we can help you with that, but that is an important thing to address. And we can take that offline. We might even at some point think about a webinar, Kristine, on some of these questions that are hard to answer in a minute. That we need about 45 minutes to unpack.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And we have come to the ending of our time, and so appreciate all your great questions and all the wonderful insights that you all brought to this. We will try to answer some of these other questions, as Joel said, in future webinars. I think that we'll have some great ideas for that. Here is one more shot at the QR code to download 6 practical ways to finish 2022 strong. And you'll see some of the details, a little bit more detail in some of the areas. One of the people had asked about talking about endowing an annual gift. What does that look like? And there's a great example in the materials that you can take a look at. So Thank you all so very much for being here. Joel and I really enjoyed spending time with you. And if we can help in any way, horizons.net is a place to find us. Thanks so much.